This week on the Sports Initiative podcast, I sit down with high performance guru Mark Bennett. He discusses his need centered approach and how this helps high performance organizations, how, when he's observing companies, he identifies problems and suggests solutions, as well as the intricacies of the hiring and firing process, including the evaluation of coach performance. As always, if you enjoy this podcast, please make sure you share it with friends and family. I hope you enjoy. Yeah, Mark, thank you so much for spending a bit of your Thursday afternoon with me and with us. Everyone's listening. I know you're an incredibly busy man. I've been looking both at your X and your website and all those different things, and I can see by the amount of content that's on there that you're incredibly busy. So really appreciate you giving up a bit of your time to talk to us.
Well, thanks for inviting me on. A new audience. I hope by the end of this that anyone listening is going to take something that's going to add value to what they do after they've listened to it.
Yeah, perfect. So for people that maybe don't know you, haven't come across your work, etc. before, could you just give us, I guess, a bit of a whistle-stop tour of who you are and what you do?
So the short version is Mark Bennett. I have spent over 30 years developing an approach in organizations, teams, to develop the best culture, develop the best decision makers, improve managers and coaches to increase their judgment and allow them how they can influence somebody effectively in choice, execution, evaluation, judgment, so they can impact someone unsupervised, as opposed to have to be supervising someone to get them to make choices and commit and review. So the system I've developed is called the Performance Development System. And that's the holistic approach of full intervention with a corporate business, a full sports team, or a national governing body. So I've worked with over 30 sports, from NBA, Major League Baseball, Premiership Rugby, England Rugby, Premiership Football, lacrosse, basketball, netball, etc., across the board, and grassroots and age groups, and also corporate business, and also in schools in rough neighborhoods in the States and in UK, but also in the wealthier schools as well.
Perfect. Yeah, I think a really nice overview, and we'll definitely go into a lot of that. So if we talk about the context initially and kind of definitions and stuff. So when you mention, I guess, the words culture and decision making, can you define those for us? And what does that mean, I guess, when we're looking about that from an organizational perspective? What do we mean when we're talking about those types of words?
So only my take, and that it may be other people's takes as well, but my take on culture is the natural behaviors that exist within the people, within any organizational team, and how they are under pressure, under no pressure, on good days and bad days, in the interdependency around the people within it. So for me, that is what culture is. And then when we look at performance, decision making, that again, it doesn't necessarily mean, and this may be a whole conversation on its own, but culture and outcome performance may not be the same. So what I mean by that is you may have the best culture in the world. It doesn't mean to say you're going to win every single match or, perform to the best. The culture is the behavioral aspects of an environment. The performance is the capability, competency of the people you're in it. And so it's understanding how they synergize, and also understanding within culture and performance, there is wellness and performance, which is actually symbiotic and not separate. Again, that might be another deep dive. So understanding decision-making is whether you're an accountant in a business, whether you're a player on a pitch, whether you're a golfer as an individual, whether you're a coach on the sideline, whether you're a parent. That decision-making is the judgment that you make in the actions or words that you're going to take based on the data you can take in and interpret, align to what the purpose of the conversation is. So all of that may be in a silent action of something you do. That may be in a verbal action of how you're going to interact with somebody else. And an expectation is that interaction is going to have a action after, i.e. it must go somewhere. So that's when we're looking at the decision making, the judgment of someone in what they do or what they say, whether that's to others or whether on their own unsupervised in any type of pressure.
So you mentioned the I guess the disparity between not necessarily culture and performance not going hand in hand. Why do you hold that belief?
It's just really the experience of being in good and bad cultures, being in teams that are winning but a very poisonous culture, and teams that have fantastic culture that are not winning. So, you know, it's understanding the key aspects of each of those, and understanding, you know, what is the purpose, what I call the lighthouse, whether you're a business or a sport, whatever it may be. The lighthouse is something you're working to become, look, sounds like, and be. But the capability of the people you have in the organization in knowledge and skills, understanding, and also how they work well together or not, will impact the performance outcome. Not to mention the external variables, which you can't guarantee results because there's an opposition, there's too many variables to indicate. And indeed, an umpire and referee may be influencing the results. So it's just understanding. That's why I'm talk about performance than results, but understand just because you got great culture doesn't naturally mean you got performance. And just because you're winning games doesn't mean to say you have a good culture.
Okay, so when you're assessing an environment, you go into an organization and you've been brought in, and they're saying, listen, this is the type of work that we want you to come and do with us. What kind of steps you take on initially to, I guess, one, understand what performance looks like. So if they're high performing, middle performing, low performing, what their culture is, and then I guess where there's strengths or weaknesses or underperformance or overperformance in those areas. What does that look like when you go into an environment?
If I use the example of elite performance, so professional teams or a corporate business organization, before I even start, I want to understand their need, not their want. So, you know, what is it why are they bringing me in? You know, what is it that they feel they need to change, and what is it they want to get to? Because if you don't need to change anything, why are you bringing me in? So, and then it's 7 days of just observing. So in classrooms, in meetings, in interactions, if it's sport, in matches, in post-match, pre-match, timeouts, what the practices look like, the meetings, and then the interaction of the staff. So, you know, I always look at, if I were to simplify this, because there's so much to it, I look at their mission statement on their walls that most people can never remember, by the way, when I ask them, and what they say to me is, you know, who they are and what they want to be. And then I look at the human behaviors, and are the human behaviors that I'm seeing when things go well or not, the interaction between staff, player, the ones that are not getting picked, the ones that are the favorites, the non-favorites, all of those elements, and look at, do their behaviors align to what they say their mission statement is or their purpose? And then from that data, then you start to see gaps generally. And then the gaps, I think the skill and the craft of anyone like me coming in would be to identify where the source of the issues are. So anyone can, or most people can identify an issue. Where the challenge is identifying the source of the issue and then identifying priority solutions to facilitate the change needed, which is where the tough bit begins.
Yeah, the bits on the wall are a fascinating one. I remember speaking to a friend of mine who said he overheard his girlfriend on a work call, and they were talking about their values as a company and whatnot. And he worked for a different company, and he said to me, 4 out of the 5 were the same as what our company is. So he said, we've got these words on the wall that it just seems like someone's just plucked them university and gone, oh, that'll be us now. He said it doesn't actually mean anything if we all just have these same variants, or in that case, very, very similar. I'd imagine that you see that kind of context quite a lot, where they have something up on a wall, but actually no one's paying any attention to what is or isn't being said there.
Oh, 100%. And I think there's a lot of challenges with that, is because who's designed that? Where do they get that in? Do they have a session where they all get the managers together and go, right, who's what you want to be? A great example is if you watch social media, the amount of likes and shares a great infographic gets compared with someone sharing, here's a solution to a problem in the real world. The infographics get the thousands of shares and loves. but it's an infographic. You know, it's not telling you, well, how do I become that? How do I need to change? How do I need to embed that? So I think people like signs, people like motivational chats, people like great words. But when it comes to what does that really look like, and do we know, am I self-aware of, am I aligned to that in my behaviors, in my role and responsibilities? How am I checking and testing that? Okay, well, how am I getting the feedback externally or internally to be accurate? And then what am I doing about it to align to that? Or do we need to change what's saying on the wall? Because it actually isn't us.
And so, in your experience, where does the breakdown normally come from?
Oh, there's so many. Let me challenge you on the question. Is the question, where is the disparity between what's on the wall and the behaviors? Is that the question you're asking?
Yeah.
Okay, so not everyone understanding what they look like from the beginning, not assigning what I call UAEs, the unacceptable, acceptable behaviors for everybody within their roles specifically. What does that look and sound like to me? And then not daily, weekly investing in it and checking it, highlighting the exceptionals, highlight the unacceptables with solutions, and building a environment where no one is scared to challenge and support that, having that to become natural. When that's missing, then it disappears. Then the alignment between what's on the wall and what you see is just, the gaps become huge. Because the only time then, often, I'm generalizing here, but the only time then someone talks to somebody is in a disciplinary interview when something's gone terribly wrong.
Yeah, yeah, it makes sense because I mean, look, I'm looking on a really wide berth here, and I have no inside information to this club. But when you look at someone like Man United, the outside perception is that's come from top up, disengagement of values or thing, and that's made everyone feel like that. My perception, having been in the sports industry for a while, is that I don't think it ever just comes from the top up. I think that actually there's probably breakdown points all the way across the pathway. And so it might be as simple as some players turning up late to training for no apparent reason, which is probably as problematic as someone in the accounts department not doing the due diligence around numbers and sending off accounts that are incorrect. And I often find that when things are going well, everyone buys into it. But when things start going poorly, across the board, people begin to take liberties and begin to act in ways that maybe don't align to the values of clubs. Is that something that you've seen in your work?
Well, there's a few elements to this. And I think anytime you're going to share something, there's a lot of elements, and we've got to be selective. So let's look at the elements to what you've just said there, and then I'll finish with a caveat, which I think is really important for anyone looking externally at a team, an elite team or organization. So the first few elements is, often the issues are there even when things are going well, but no one's looking for them because things are going well. So people go, oh, yeah, it doesn't bother. Oh, he's playing well. Oh, we're okay that he didn't return the email at the beginning of the week where we've asked everyone to check it and reply. So all of a sudden, things become habit. Unacceptable become habit because the result we're seeing looks good. And only when the results start going wrong do people start looking for fault and for blame. And often the behaviors have always been there, and now they're trying to find fault. So this is where I see commonly where the issue is what we need to be doing is, whether the results are great or not, are we aligning to the behaviors we said, everybody? If we are, and we're still not getting the results we want, is that a capability issue? If it is, well, there's nothing we can do about that straight away. But, you know, is there a source we can work on in understanding, in skill, technical, tactical, if it's sport? If we're saying, well, actually, there's something else to that, what we need to do is say, well, if we're aligning to the behaviors we said are the behaviors that are going to get us where we want to be, if the capability is there, then what we need to do then is recheck the behaviors we said will give us there, because it's probably there's a flaw in the agreed behaviors, if that makes sense. So they're kind of the key elements. The last thing I'd say when people look outside in, so you use Manchester United as an example, I found when I've worked inside elite sport, and I have globally, what you see on the outside can be so incorrect. It's unbelievable. It could be down to everyone working hard and doing everything they think is right, but they're so caught up in it, they've got no one external coming in and going, actually, this is great, but this is where your missing link is. So, sometimes when you are in, like, if you've been to different academies when you've been working, sometimes when you're in it for a year, you can get desensitized to the little things, but sometimes when you go to a new place, all of a sudden those little things become really obvious, and you ask those simple questions. Why do you do this? Well, we've always done it that way. And it's just that stepping back. So I'm really mindful now that when I see an external that I haven't been in to observe, I never make a judgment on why there are issues, or indeed if there's issues, particularly with a Premiership manager, if it's football that comes in. Some questions, and not to shoot off on a tangent, but this is a great example. Some managers of elite sport will take the job because they want the job and the money and the prestige. And what they won't do before taking the job is they won't speak to the owners that are giving them the job to say, right, where is my autonomy? Where are the funds? What is your expectation of success? And how long have I got? Because we need to agree that before I accept the job. So what can happen is, what I called is, there's some grey. So what we need to do, we haven't eliminated the grey into owner expectations and the new manager's expectations. And when I get the job, I'll be able to do this. And all of a sudden then you go, no, you can't do that. Oh, you haven't got this. Oh, we need those results within 3 months or you're off again. So now we're shifting the manager's behavior, because the manager's expectations are different than the owners, but it wasn't discussed and the clarity wasn't there. You can have the exact same issue with coaches and players. There's grey there. There's unspoken things because we haven't set back and eliminated the grey to seek clarity and then hold each other accountable once we've agreed the UAEs on those behaviors and clarity, or indeed the expectations.
And so on that note, how do coaches and I guess hiring managers, senior leadership team, manage the disparity between UAEs or culture to a high performer? So this is, I think, a fascinating topic in terms of, at times people will flex on beliefs because they think that this individual is going to be the thing that wins them the championship, or the thing that gets them 20 plus goals a season. So how is it that people flex on those things? And do you think that it's the lack of clarity that you're discussing that actually they don't realize how far apart they are before they even come into the building, and all of a sudden it becomes a big issue once they've actually come through the door and the paperwork's all signed?
Yeah, and we can relate this. Anyone listening here, whether you're in grassroots, and you've got, someone running a club and they're bringing in coaches or whatever it may be, all the way to the elite and in business, the common issues we have are the people selecting people and employing people don't know what to look for. They don't understand what is it I need aligned to my lighthouse, because often they don't even have a lighthouse. They have a mission statement, but the behaviors required and what that looks like isn't there. So what you find is, and this can happen at Premiership football, is quite common, and in other sports in the States, is the people hiring actually don't know what to look for in the people hiring, and then their assessment of them isn't clear. And then when people are coming in, there is that disparity. There is that lack of clarity in roles, responsibilities, permissions, as I call them, and expectations. And if as soon as that grey is in there, people will start what they believe working hard in their perception towards a direction and a choice. And then all of a sudden you've got someone thinking, well, that's not what I expected you to do. Well, I'm not happy with that. And what happens often then, there can be this silence, and then it builds up. And the unhappiness or disparity builds up, and it's unspoken until it explodes. And then no one is in a good state to have a discussion. Go, well, hang on, I've been doing this for months and you never said that I had an issue. And this we can have with even young players and coaches, because we haven't pre-agreed, there isn't clarity, and then we're not honoring every single day the very things we said. We let it slip. So even if it is agreed, we let it slip because, oh, that's going to be hassle to say anything, I'll let it go. And that's when you have the problem.
So from an interviewing process, if I were to say to you, you're on a hiring panel and you've got a coach coming into your environment, maybe you're the chairman or you're consulting with the chairman, whatever, what type of in-depth due diligence or what type of questions would you ask related to behaviors that you would want, that you think would really amplify what that coach is going to bring to your environment. So if you ask them the question, you're able to maybe see whether there is a cultural fit or not.
I'd say everything that needs finding out happens outside an interview. I'll give you an example before I get into some examples of reality.
No, this is really good. This is really good.
I was working with Golf England many years ago, helping their talent pathway and then running coaching for their national coaches, the golf coaches. And there was a spot came up for the under-21s head coach for Golf England. And obviously Golf England is a high standard at amateur level. And a chap called Rob Watts, who I'd mentored and had been through my training a few years before, went for the interview and didn't get it. And I'm thinking, everything that you say you want, Rob is. And I say, interesting, why didn't you give Rob the job? Just in a social chat with one of the guys that was on the board. And he said, well, he just didn't interview well. I said, have you watched him coach? Just casually gone down, not as a formal, right, I'm going to watch you coach. And he said, no. I said, well, you're missing a trick there, because he's the right man for the job. And funny enough, 2 years later, he got the job and he's been doing very well in the job ever since. The challenge we have is when you interview someone, some people that are great coaches, managers, are not great interviewees. So to answer the question, if I was on a board and I go, right, we need to find the right person, I want to be clear on what the club expectation is, where we want to go, year, 2 year, 3 year, 4 years. I want to know what's your immediate expectation, how much time has this person got? Have we got the right expectations in our capability of our team and players around us? How are we going to measure that? Is there a change that needed within investment of other players, etc., aligned to your expectation this season, next season, all that stuff? I need that data. Then I do everything I can to find videos or do some covert observation of the coaches coaching, managing when things go wrong, when things go well, how they interact when a player is getting disengaged, how they interact when there's a disciplinary, how they interact when an athlete's underperforming. All that stuff is what is going to tell me the no's. I still may not have the yeses, but what I can do is I can identify the no's, and some yes might pop out. And then it's when someone comes in is asking them. So, as opposed to you're asking a bunch of questions, is asking them, what questions do you have of us? Now that could tell you a lot, because if someone's done their homework, they should be asking the questions. Okay, what is your expectation of me? What autonomy do I have? Where are we sitting? How long is your expectation of me to make this change? Now you've said this was the expectation, and this is what I need. So now if someone's giving me that, I'm saying that's someone thoughtful now. That's someone thinking about their role. If someone comes in and go, no, I'm fine. I can do whatever you want. Yeah, I'm the man. That's a warning sign for me. You go, well, hang on, you don't know what I want. You haven't been in the club, so you don't know the variables, but you're saying you can get the results. Well, no one can guarantee results. So now there's more warning signs. So I think a lot of it is what data can you have that isn't in the interview, and then what can they ask and share? And does that align to the type person we want within their behaviors and the questions they're asking?
And when you're doing that due diligence in the background, how reliable, I guess, or how in depth can you go on sourcing that information? So I'm a Tottenham fan, as everyone on this podcast will be sick of hearing me talk about. Ange Postecoglou is obviously a quite senior coach, and I'd imagine there's a lot of examples of going to Australia, going to Japan, going to Scotland, of what he was good at, what he was not so good at, and what his expectation environment going to be. Now, if you just go and ask tertiary or tertiary people around there, you're probably going to go and get a positive review of going, yeah, he's really good, he's done XYZ. But by the sounds of what you're saying is, I actually want the players that maybe there's been a disagreement with, that he doesn't align to, that he didn't maybe want in the club and moved on or whatever, and say, what did you think, what did you feel, what was your experience? Because that's giving you more of a character rest for him. So going, listen, he got me out of the club, but actually his dealings with me up until that point were top, and I've got nothing negative to say. Or he acted this way when we started losing some games. all of a sudden it became a you problem rather than a we problem. So that's something to consider. So is it all those types of background bits that you're looking to try and fill in?
I think as much data as you can. What you don't want is echo chambers. What you don't want is all the fans ask, the fan of the, well, don't say fans and spectators, but, the player, oh, he always picked me, he was great. What you need is balance. Now, not to say anyone's going to be honest. You may have someone that he dropped and you go, oh, he's terrible, he didn't listen to me, he didn't understand, give me the time. But when you start delving into, so how did he share with you you're not getting picked? Now, if that player says, well, he sat me down on a one-to-one and he was basically said to me, look, the reason I'm not picking you is because in this game, I need someone fast on the wing. You're not fast on the wing. Now, if that's an honest feedback, then you go, well, that's decent. It's uncomfortable, but he's being honest with you on why you're not getting picked. If he's giving waffle, he's going, well, he just told me next week, but next week never came. I'm doing well, just next week, just keep going. Then there's a warning sign right there because there's a lack of honesty. Or if he says a lie, which can happen, or she says a lie of, well, you're not getting picked because of this. And then you find out, actually, then I found out later, he said the same to somebody else. Now that is not aligned to the culture, because the one thing you cannot have in a strong culture or maximizing people performance is dishonesty. So these are the little variables, and it's just eliminating echo chambers is the important part. And then also understanding what people are telling me may not be accurate.
What I like there, though, is honesty will be on a lot of walls. People listening now, they'll know a lot of mantras is honesty. Well, actually, that's a really good example. Is it honesty or isn't it? So if we want to live and die by these principles, there's a really good example. Has he been straight with you and said, you're not performing well enough at the minute, you're not selected? You don't, it's an uncomfortable conversation, but it's honest. So if that's one of your mantras, he's aligning to the values that you spoke about earlier.
And delving into what you've just said there, that needs to be detail specific with data support. So instead of you're not performing well enough, is you're not performing well enough in this yet. Your effort and energy can't question, but capability yet, you're not in line with this player. And this is why I'm picking this player above you. Still working hard. If he's lazy, you'd have got the job, but he's working hard too, or she's working hard too. However, this is your strategy right now. Focus on this. Speak to Danny or Sarah, the speed coach, or, that defense coach. Put some extra hours in there. Let me know how it's going. So now what I'm saying is it may be, look, to be honest, I'm going to continue to invest in you this season, but unless someone's injured, I don't think you're ready this season. But I'm going to keep investing in you because I love your attitude, love your work rate. And I can see you in another season time starting to get more minutes. That, again, if that's being honest, then that is honest. But we've got to give them more than you're just not playing well enough or you're just not performing well enough.
Yeah. And this is just my experience of this. I also think that there's a real balance in that in terms of if you overcomplicate it or you over-rationale, at times you can get it where there's a not constant excuse or constant validation of, them going, well, why aren't I selected this week? Why aren't I selected this week? It's like, well, hold up. We spoke 2 weeks ago about you going and seeing the speed coach. Have you done any of those things? And it being a yes or no answer. So I think there's quite a nice body of work around that in terms of actually, here's some projects that we're going to assist you with over the next 2 or 3 weeks. And then maybe it's a conversation on week 3, not the Friday, the Monday before Tuesday's game, the next Friday. It's kind of like, well, no, there's going to be a level of consistency if that's what we're going after. If there's a body of work that you're currently underperforming in, there needs to be a body of work to put in by all of us to assist you to get better at that.
Yeah, and also don't forget, I use a principle of player first, player last, which is such a powerful management and corporate tool as well. So that example you said, if I'd had an agreement with an athlete in this situation where it says, look, you're not getting picked yet above this player for this particular team we're playing against because this is the area that's letting you down. So that may be transition in defense. Your head goes down, poor referee decision, and you're slow to get back. I need someone that sprints straight back. That half a second is critical. And at the moment, look at the data. You're not doing that in practice. You haven't been doing that in matches. I can't put you on a pitch until that's improved. Speak to such and such. Let's invest in this. Once I see a considerable change in that behavior, that now you're back on the options list again. But until that happens, so if that as an example, then that's me. The player last would be, okay, great, coach. Yeah, thanks for that. So, well, hang on, just run that past me to make sure I haven't missed anything. So now they have to go, well, this is why, this is what I'm going to do. Okay. And then I can say, well, when are you going to speak to him or her? Okay. So what's that going to look like to you? And now they have to tell me. So now I know it's gone in and they're interpreting the words. Now, if they come back to me and they go, coach, why am I not getting picked? As opposed to me reminding them, I just say to them, remind me our last conversation and what we agreed. Now they have to tell me. I say, okay, review against that. So now they have to tell me, oh, well, actually, no, I didn't. Okay. So based on your answers, what do you think I'm going to say to you? Oh, well, okay. So if you want the opportunity, no guarantees, what do you need to change? Because if you keep doing what you're doing, you're telling me, but you're not showing me. I need you to show me. Not once, not when it feels good, every single time. So what do you need to change? And what's preventing you from changing? Now they've got to tell me.
And I guess it's that accountability piece, which is which is really a giving them own. When we talk about ownership, that's ownership to a degree. It's like you're having conversations. It's your journey. It's your bit. I'm a guiding light. I'm helping you highlight areas to improve. Are you willing to go and put those bits in? And how do you need me to help you to put those bits in? So it's that ownership bit that is really big.
Yeah.
A lot of people say.
Yeah, and I think that's another skill where some managers haven't been taught or supported in. And I mean, no manager I've ever known has deliberately sabotaged a player, or a team. But you don't know what you don't know. So if they've only been used to, and we know if we look at Premiership football, for example, there's a lot of, not all, but there's a lot of top flight managers that are fast tracked into those jobs because they were good players or great players. And all of a sudden then they get fired, and then a season 2 years later they get a top job again. So, it's in that process. And if they've only known this is how my managers used to interview me, now some might go, that was terrible, I need to find a better way. But some might go, worked for me, I was okay, so this is how I'm going to deliver it, without knowing actually generations are changing now. The team, the sport's changed, how it's moved on. Is that now effective? Okay, so what do I need to do? And that's that self-awareness again at the manager. And it's not a deliberate, it's just sometimes you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah, I'm not. I know we said about rabbit holes. I'm not going down the rabbit hole of former players getting fast tracked, because otherwise it would be the most angry that anyone's heard me in 170 episodes of this podcast. I understand it on certain aspects, but others it's completely mind blowing to me. So one thing before we shift slightly is you mentioned around those UAEs or the lighthouse in terms of what we're going after. If I were to say to you, I guess your personal ones, in terms of if you were in charge of a high profiling organization and the ones that you thought were most conducive to high performance culture, not saying outcomes are going to be the same, but the ones that you thought most people can get on board with and that help drive a good culture, what would those be?
Everybody knowing their role, everybody committing to their role, unsupervised or unsupervised, everyone having that capability to seek to understand within their, I call them capability combinations. So understanding your role within an organization and team and committing to that role, but also understanding the other people's roles around you and helping them be the best they can be. So within that framework, you need, and then you can break it down whatever times, we need to be a good judgment decision maker within my role. I need to make sure I seek to understand others. I need to make sure I've eliminated the grey within those areas, and I'm honouring the principles that we teach throughout any, we call that need-centred approach, is the action review process, decision making, the rule of 3. So in those, we're just keeping them alive. So always eliminating the grey, always commit to what you've agreed and understanding your role, understanding the other people's roles around you that you interact with, and helping them be the best they can be. Helping them be the best they can be may often challenge them when they haven't done what they said they were going to do. Helping them be the best they can be when they've asked you to do something, you've seek to understand because you don't actually understand it. So not to get caught, it depends on what their lighthouse is, but in essence, they're the real common ones. We want to develop interdependent teams that are great decision makers live, that can make decisions based on what they see and review live and adapt based on the situation without the need for the coach or external support. But the external support has to be there, because if you don't understand, you always see if you can work it out, what I call the Sherlock Holmes. But then if you can't, you always seek for clarity. You're never silent. So if we relate that to athletes on a court or a pitch, often what you'll have is you'll have the 4 or 5 really verbal athletes, even at elite level. And then you have people that are nodding and they haven't got a clue what their role is, or they don't really understand, but they don't want to go, hey, hang on, no, I'm not clear. Can we just go through this again? Or actually, no, can we not move on? Can you put me a bit more under pressure? I need this now. This is a bit too easy for me. Can we work through this again at, at high pressure? Can you mark me? Because I need that. So that's where we're going. I understand my role. My role is this. I'm not getting this. I need this in practice, because actually it's not helping to test me. That's understanding your role. That's helping others be the best they can be. And it's helping the people that are coaching you have the clarity to them understanding what you do, you don't understand, you trying to work it out, you can't, but then you making sure, does my teammate need me now? Do I need to go harder on my teammate because I know that's their weakness, that's their work on? I'm not going to be passive on them, I'm going to help them. And if they go, I don't feel like doing it right now. No. Let's do it now. This is the opportunity now, because this is what's going to help you get better. That's the type every time environment and culture we want to cultivate.
This, Mark, it's almost like you read my mind of where I want to go with this next question. So I know we haven't discussed this before, but it's brilliant. So one of the things we said right at the start was around the disparity sometimes between high culture and high performance. And at times you can be environments where there's not particularly great culture, but relatively good high performance. I think an example of this is probably high profile in England was the England cricket team at one point, where the situation with Kevin Peterson and some of the bowlers and what that kind of looked like. So I guess you mentioned there around people having clarity of roles and clarity of responsibilities and being able to challenge one another. How do you deal with that in an environment of, I guess, which is high stress and high performance, but it might be detrimental to, I guess, people's well-beings or the culture? So if you've got people that are demanding that you have successful outcomes because that's what they want, and they think that holding people account in that kind of hostile way is what's going to get the high performance, but it naturally builds a level of resentment and stuff, maybe off the pitch or off the court.
So there's a few answers to this. So again, we'll streamline. The first thing is the part of when we ever go in and start, we talk about hardware and software. So one of the things I do with coaches, managers, organizations, and indeed athletes is understand the difference between the two. So hardware would be your physical, your technical, and your tactical. So the software would be you being aware of your state, managing your state, judgment of decision making, scanning, committing without fear, reviewing live, effective communication. And I'll loop back to this because this will answer part of your question. And the 3 A's is being able to accept data from other people, acknowledge it and act on it, even if it's being said in a way you don't like, which can happen under pressure. Now, the communication is massive, because the amount of organizations that go into it, and I ask them, what is effective communication? And they share this long list. It's loud, it's clear, it's just blah, blah, blah nonsense. But somewhere this is being taught, by the way, because it wouldn't keep echoing. Effective communication is only effective if it has the desired impact. So now when people start being hostile, there's 2 things going back to your point. When people are so caught up in the results and they're going, right, you need to do this, you need to do this. We've got to break down the result and go, hang on a minute. Yes, we all want to win, but what are the elements that is going to allow everyone to perform to their max? So one of the things is being aware and managing your state. So what would be an unacceptable state? Okay, so that they're making the best choice possible in the situation. Well, we know state's going to impact that, and scanning, data capture, judgment in the moment, committing without fear. Well, we know if we're going to slate people every time we think they haven't done it in outcome, that's going to build fear in committing to something. So again, that's a negative based on maximizing result potential. And then that being able to review live. So when I'm now talking about effective communication, when you go, now you're venting because your expectations are higher than this other athletes, and we haven't agreed what they are, by the way. So empathy and understanding others, you're a better player, but you're a better player. You're at a different place than these are now, but your job is to get the best out of that player. So let's look at ways that you're communicating. You're communicating like this now. What's the ripple to that athlete, positive or negative? Well, it's negative, but they should. Okay, no. It's not what they should, what they are. So how could you communicate to get your desired impact, i.e. getting them to perform effectively? The behavioral stuff, getting them to commit when no one's watching or whatever it may be, or in this moment, getting them to react in a way that's going to help you perform this way. Okay, so which way is the more effective way to communicate right now? This way. Okay, show me next time. Now, I'll give you a real world example. I was working with a basketball team, and there was a basketball player that was brought up in a very rough neighborhood of America, homeless, real strong athlete, real high standards. And he'd use the N-word with other players. He was black, and it was in a British club. And that's obviously seen very differently over here. And there was fights going on because we started I use this thing, different phases of training. So we have learn it, perform it, challenge it. And the challenge is that the coach is trying to catch the players out, is trying to break down, find out what the gaps are. So one of the things, an example of this is, he was a attacking player, and we said to the defensive players, right, we know what's his weakness. And they said what his weakness is, mentally, physically. Right, I want you to stay within the rules, but I need you to see if you can get that out, get that weakness out, show it. Go at him hard, bang, get your hands around him, but stay within the rules. So he started to do this. The defender we briefed secretly, and all of a sudden now he's not getting success, this guy from the Bronx. And then he starts swearing, and I'm having to go at the players around him. And then a fight starts. So I'm there, I pull it away. I go, okay, talk to me now what we pre-agreed. And they're like, yeah. No. What are we pre-agreeing? Were you successful there or not? Were you effective in what you said there? Yes or no? No. Okay, so when you listened, were you effective in how you took it? Yes or no? Acceptable or unacceptable? Because this was all pre-agreed when we're in a good place. So they both said unacceptable. Okay, so you're both unacceptable. I agree. Okay, so what would at least acceptable be in this moment? And they told me, okay, right, you got 10 seconds now, talk amongst yourselves. We're going again. You need to show me now. State change when these two athletes that went out again, and all of a sudden it was hard, but they managed it better. So then we do that loop round at the end. We go, okay, review what happened, because we want the learning connection. Says, well, I did this. He got in my head and said, do you know why he got in your head? No. Well, we briefed him to. So he was doing exactly what we wanted, because that's something that hooks up you in matches. People can get in your head. And he was like, he said, so did he win? Yeah. Okay. But what did you take from it next time? He says, well, I became stronger. Great. So now you know. What about you? How you reacted when he vented? Did you lose your state? Yes. Etc. No. So what do you need to do next time? Bang. Did you show me you could do that? Yes. Great. Learning for everybody. So those are the moments where we seek them out. And as soon as we see them, there's an intervention with clarity and honesty. What often happens within those, now I'm not into, I haven't been into the cricket, so I don't know the actual answers, but if there was people that were bullying, that were being negative towards someone, that were doing whispers behind people's backs, as soon as you find out about it, you eliminate it with clarity. And if there is a grey that hasn't been pre-agreed, you go, there's some grey here, let me establish some clarity. And then you're looking and scanning for every single time. And when it's better, we do a hot review highlight. Talk to me what happened there. What was better? What was different than last time? Great. I'm recognizing that. We need to recognize that's progress. As soon as it's unacceptable, we're seeing them manage within themselves. If they're not, I'm in for an intervention. And I don't mind if we have to stop training for that to happen. I don't mind if we have to cancel a meeting for the intervention to happen, because if we don't, that's poison. And what we need to do is eliminate the poison. And I think some clubs are fearful of doing that, especially if it's a top player, especially if it's, oh, yeah, but he'll win, she'll win. And we go, no. They will not win because they can't win on their own. So if they're now pulling players down, it's unacceptable. And that doesn't align to our culture. Back to making sure, because what will happen is you might get a bubble of results. You might get, I think, the England women's football team that won the World Cup. We would suggest that their culture wasn't great. There was complaints going in beforehand, right? They wanted to get rid, and then the big issue with the person hugging or kissing, whatever it was. Now, clearly that was not that came from something else. So their culture was clearly poisonous, but they won the World Cup. How many of them would connect to long-term wellness? You can see that there could have been some serious wellness issues going on behind the scenes. And that's where my focus is: wellness and performance are symbiotic. High performance, if you want consistent high performance and getting the best out of the athletes you've got, investing daily in that wellness and aligning them both together and not just wait until there's a problem maximizes performance. You can't guarantee results, but those two elements, the first bit I discussed and that, they do connect together.
And how do you manage perceptions around this work? So if I look at like Kobe Bryant, for example, and you've got a lot of historical data on him being incredibly high challenge to teammates. You've got Michael Jordan potentially being the same. And listen, I've been through football environments. I know from speaking to people on this podcast and separately, Man United during the 1990s was incredibly hostile. And what people will point to at times is to say, well, look at all these high performing teams, there's an edge to them. So I've never seen a high performing team that doesn't have an edge. You have to have an edge to be high performing. So how do I guess you manage that type of, granted anecdotal, but anecdotal success, which some people are still gonna use as their lighthouse, like we spoke about earlier?
Yes, it's if I can be blunt, it's ignorance of understanding edge and bullying. Edge is standards. Edge is everyone hold each other accountable to the standards that we're capable of. That's positive culture. How we communicate, how we manage our state to uphold those standards, that's effective communication. Bullying and swearing and hitting someone is a weak way to maintain high standards. It's someone that hasn't got the skills to do anything different. And look at Michael Jordan. I mean, we understand, some of the things he used to do. How many NBA titles did they win without Pippen in the team? So people talk about Michael Jordan, but actually they needed Pippen. So when we're talking about, well, it's got to be him. And when you look at these things, is where we are now in this world is very different to where we were pre-internet, in what people could get away with, what was acceptable culturally, human cultural stuff. And I think if you're a low skill person, actually having a big bully, I was in the military, I ran a commando training wing, I understand, been in operations, I understand pressure and stress. But the very best leaders are the ones that didn't allow standards to drop, managed their state and were direct when it needed to be, but they were not bullies. And I think that's the difference, is managers understanding that standards and how we communicate or hold those standards need to be relentless. But how we get the best out of others is not hitting them, is not swearing down at them, is not splitting into voids and slagging off other people and not actually communicating it. That is not effective performance. And indeed, it's not effective culture.
And so when you're looking at, because what this ultimately comes back to is the effective communication, right? Like, I think that's been an underlying theme of this conversation. What I've probably looked at more over the last few years, and other people that I've worked alongside, is kind of your personality types and how a self-awareness of who I am and how I act and how I'm perceived to the world and what that looks like. Obviously, everyone talks about having variety in their environments, or different types of people, so that we've got different perspective. Naturally, by having those differences, you're going to have people that maybe their personality types or their inherent way of working begin to collide in terms of the way that I like receiving feedback. It might be that your way is to be really direct with me and say, that isn't good enough, XYZ needs to happen, end of discussion. Now, for you, that's really effective communication. For me, that's a little bit more direct. I know you mentioned earlier about understanding where people are. How do you have that balancing act of catering to those that are in your environment, catering to the people, but also being really unapologetic and trying to make sure that these high standards are there, and always leaning back to the fact that, yeah, I am being direct with you, but it's because we want this. That's what we've all agreed we're after.
So that falls into mental resilience and understanding others. So when I train people in the rule of three and the 3 A's, so the rule of three is that one is me managing my state, me making the best choices, what I see, committing with intent, evaluating live. That's me being the best version of me. Rule of two is I'm recognizing someone, their state's poor, they're not committing, behavioral or wrong tactical choice execution. I reach out to have an effective impact. Back at 1, if I'm struggling, I'm reach out for help, whether that's state or technical, tactical. So this is organically happening. Now, the 3 A's is if someone reaches out to you, A, the first A is I'm accepting it internally. Even if I don't like how it's being said, I'm accepting it because they're reaching out. Acknowledge is I'm letting them know, thumb up or words, and then I'm actioning it. Now, rule of 3 is coaches scanning. So the aim is not to get the 3s, but one of the things we have to teach to athletes and indeed coaches is when there's no stress, it's quite easy to think, oh, Danny likes being spoken to like this, so I'll speak to Danny like this because that's the best for him. Oh, Julie, oh yeah, Julie, when she's struggling, that's the best way to speak to Julie. Because I'm not under stress, it's easy for me to make those adaptations. However, when people are under stress, they may not have the smartness. Some people do. I'll give George Ford an example, England rugby player, has the ability, even under stress, to adapt those words, but most people won't. So we've got to understand that you will not receive it always in a way you prefer. But it's up to you to filter the data to go, is this data going to help me be better? Yes. Well, then take the data and do something with it. And understand the fact they're stressed, they're still reaching out to help you be more effective, then embrace that. Now we can loop around and go, how can we be a little bit better, etc. But the fact they're reaching out. Now, one of the things we've got to do as well is educate people in communication. You've got to communicate solution, not problem. So when I'm communicating with someone, there's no point in me saying, oh, you were too slow. How helpful is that? Oh, yeah, that was wrong. That's not effective. That's not, how is it giving them a solution? So if you're gonna communicate, and if someone's a bit short or not going wide and coming in, you just say, right, next time stay out a bit wider, hold back 1 more second. Okay, attack that next 5 minutes a bit quicker next time. Give me 10% more on that speed. That's a solution right there. Now you can, if you're stressed, you might say that aggressively, but the clarity of the words they can do something with. So there's a lot of dynamics about communication, and that's why it can't just be a chat we have at the beginning of season and a chat we have at the end of the match when everyone's silent, they're not communicating well on the pitch. No. It's a skill, it's a software. So we need to develop their awareness of both ends and then cultivate every single practice, seek opportunities. So in practice at all levels of sport, they'll have a reference board, whether it's a little whiteboard or a bigger one on the side of the pitch, the court, whatever sport. And there'll be a software and a hardware. Now, you will have your every times, which is generally software. That we do this every single time. This is our non-negotiable on and off court and pitch. This is how we live. But you'll have those software bits relative to that play, that match, that practice that don't often change. And then you have the hardware, which may be a defense or transition or attack, whatever it may be. So then when they come in for a timeout, instead of them just waffling, we review back to the board, review how are we doing? Software, yes, no. Hardware, yes, no, based on the success criteria. So now we're keeping it alive. Often you hardly ever see a software recheck during practice or matches, but actually most of the source of issues in either itself or interaction with others is a software issue, not a hardware issue.
I really like the idea of being solution focused. I know that's incredibly simple because everyone says this all the time, but actually just thinking back to myself when I used to play, I'm one that doesn't overly like really direct feedback. I'm happy to be really honest about that, but I will accept it if it comes with a tactical or technical undertone. What would get my back up a little bit more would be if it became like a personal thing. If it became personal, then I'd be like, well, listen, it's a game of football. Let's kind of rein this in a little bit. Whereas if they said, you need to get tighter because at the minute he's turning every time, which is killing me there, as direct as that was, I'd go, okay, not a problem, because it's a solution to a problem that we're having in the game rather than a personal attack of you're not doing your job.
Yeah. And linking into that, this is where that capability combination I speak about, and I do a lot of work with this with managers and coaches at all level, is we need players to understand, and coaches, when we're in practice, this is where we learn capability combinations. We need to put teams out in the combinations they're going to play. But part of that is them to learn each other's capability when they're fatigued, when things aren't going well. And the tactical and technical elements they can actually commit to in live pressure. So then they get to understand, well, when Sarah's on the wing, Sarah's fast, and she's fast for the whole 90 minutes. So that long ball into that space is on. I'm going to do that. Now, Ermintrude, let's go with an Ermintrude, is now on. And really strong player, but hasn't got the speed. That ball option, I'm not going to do because she will not get to it. So now I'm helping to make sure I'm not setting false expectations in a match on something another player's never been able to do in pressure, in practice, or indeed in any match. So why am I demanding or asking of them to do it, or even expecting them to do it? And when they don't, I'm getting annoyed. So this is huge in developing that awareness of players so they don't get as anti to the players around them.
Yeah, the best example I had of this was the under-23s coach at Southampton came and delivered to us. And they put a chessboard up, and the chessboard had the players' faces on it. And they basically talked through about the premise of how different players had different expectations or different outcomes depending on the players. So, for off the top of my head, but Prowsey, for example, we know how good Prowsey's delivery is. So the minute Prowsey gets the ball, the expectation is strikers, wide players are attacking the goal. Now, if it's a different midfielder who plays in a different style, the movements will be different because they have different expectations. So, yeah, what you're saying there makes complete sense. And that chess thing always stuck with me. You've got your castles, you've got your bishops. Everyone works in slightly different ways. And what we're trying to teach at the base level for the really young kids is, can you have a self-awareness of me and maybe my friend? When you get to the top end, actually what you need is a self-awareness of everyone around me and what all our roles and responsibilities within the constraints of what each person's capable of. Okay, the capacity of the individuals now will cater for what we're going to do as a group. So we're not going to end up in a situation where our 6'4" centre half who can't run is on the halfway line trying to get in a race with someone who's like a greyhound. And so we're going to make sure that, me as the other centre half, I'm going to drop in a little bit, or we're going to provide additional support to make sure that he's not left isolated or she's not left isolated.
Now, not to delve in too deep, but let's just nail on understanding that capability. Capability changes with fatigue and state. So what we can't get, and this is really important for coaches I've seen that get this a bit wrong, bless them, and athletes, is we got to understand, just because someone's done that fresh for the first 5 minutes in practice, that is not necessarily their capability for 90 minutes in a match under pressure, or indeed any time under pressure in a match. So we got to be aware, look, there's huge variables of just because someone's done it once, that doesn't mean that's their capability. Their capability is what has been their capability in a match if they've been on for 60 minutes, 70 minutes, 80 minutes. And that's given us a better scope of judgment on actual capability. And then we got to be organic. We've got to go, the head's down because of that player is now thinking we conceded a goal because of me. Well, they're not going to be in the same understanding, I'm going to pass that ball there and movement as they would. They go, right, I'm on it, I've just saved a goal. So the capability is an organic thing, and it's us to understand where people are and understand just because they've done it in practice doesn't mean to say now they can do it in a match, because very, very different.
Yeah, and I think before we finish, because I know time-wise, player confidence is a big one in that as well. You look at someone like Harry Maguire, how he performed for times at England compared to Man United. Different context, different mindset, different support mechanisms. You saw two completely different players. And I always think about this when players transfer and maybe find it challenging in a certain environment. More often than not, the talent's still there. Like the capabilities are still there from what we've seen previously, but the context around it is maybe a bit different, either expectations or support or utilization of role or support players around it. There's so many different factors.
And just to add to that, and it loops back to what we said about half an hour ago, is the point of when you have a disruptive player, or someone said to you, you need to watch that player, they're very nasty, aggressive, or a bully, or, whatever it may be, flippant, whatever. What we've got to do is not take that data and then that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy for that athlete. I've been so often, I've seen players that people said that person's got an attitude, or athletes or people in management. And when I've gone and cleared, reset and gone, look, I'm judging you based on your behaviors now. That's it. I don't care what anyone else has said. And then when I see positive, I get them to connect the recognition if there's been an imbalance with that person. And I get people to raise their awareness in the organization. That's what we need to do. Otherwise, what we say of someone. I don't know if you've ever watched the blue-eyed, brown-eyed experiments. If anyone hasn't, the experiment, go and watch it now. There's a fantastic, powerful documentary about a teacher in the States, how they started to influence people's intelligence and testing and interaction just by them 1 week saying blue-eyed girls in the class and boys were more intelligent than brown-eyed, and then the impact it had, and then they switched it round. So we've got to be really mindful of sometimes someone is because of their hearing of that's how people perceive them. And that's another way that if we want to build culture, we need to be mindful of as an influencer to cultivate that.
Mark, we haven't touched on, I think, about 1% of your overall knowledge, and that's given me something really interesting that I'm thinking about in my head now, which I'll discuss with you off air after I hang up this part of the podcast. But last question for me for this podcast, because I'm sure we'll do it again in the future if you're up for it, which is, if I were to speak to the people that you work with, how would you hope they described you in 3 words?
They would say the silent ninja.
Okay.
Because they have.
Oh, nice. Perfect. You've had that feedback before, which is good.
The other one I have, which isn't 3 words, is the human dog whisperer, is the other one.
Okay, nice. Good. A good visualization. I like the idea behind that. But yeah, thank you so much for your time. And yeah, if you're up for it, definitely something we'll do again soon.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, thanks. I hope if anyone's listening to this and they look back, I'm always really interested. And I've got one last question for you, by the way, which I always do for these, is I'm always interested in anything resonated with anyone listening. And if you can get back to you, whether it's where you share it in your social media, because that's the bit for me, is if something resonates with you, what you're going to do with it, because that's the key. My question for you is, what's the main 1, 2, or 3 things? There might only be one that's been the biggest takeaway from you that's made you think or resonate in this conversation?
So I'm going to go for the very last thing that you said there, right? And it's a fascinating one. We do a lot of work on IDPs in academy football. And what you're saying there about being a self-fulfilling prophecy, I'm now wondering, if you say to a child, oh, you're not very good at XYZ, does that become a thing where they go, well, I'm not very good at that?
Yeah.
And so I'm now on from that one thing that you had going, should we not only focus on super strengths, but should we catch doing well for areas of development rather than highlighting an inadequacy there? Because actually, does it become, if I want someone to be more robust when tackling, or I want someone to switch play better, is by me saying you're not good at this actually just going to be a self-fulfilling prophecy, and they're going to be reluctant to do it because their feeling is, I'm not very good at this?
Yeah, and that's where we need to use the word yet much more at the end of those sentences. And also that thing about performance is a behavior, not an outcome. Let's look at the behaviors that can allow you to be the best you can be. And if you keep doing that, I guarantee you will progress. Let's get excited about the progress and let's spot that.
Yeah. So that, straight off the top of my head, I think that's a really interesting one. And then I've been making loads of notes as we've been talking here. I like the idea of the learn it, program it, challenge it piece, and being really purposeful around that. So being purposeful, if we want people to be high stretch and training, can we plan and organize interactions that bring those behaviors out so we can work with it at that moment in time? I think that's really interesting. And equally, when we're talking about not having echo chambers and judgment kind of within the environment, which is discerning which bits of information are done with a positive problem solving outcome, and which bits of information are being given with a I'm trying to be right and self-inflated ego, you're wrong type outcome, because I think they're 2 very discernible differences. So being more problem solving focus are going, I think we're going down the wrong path, because if you look at this data XYZ, we would be better served doing this. So those are probably 3 right off the top of my head that I can think of, but there'll be so many more.
Great. Love those.
Perfect. Right. I'm going to hang up the podcast call now. We'll hang fire for 5 minutes and then, but thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Sports Initiative podcast with me, Michael Wright. Please remember to follow us on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram at the Sports Initiative Podcast, and share this podcast with friends and family. I'll see you next week.